Thank you so much for joining us today for today's webinar. Again, this is entitled Racial Equity and Entrepreneurship, Systemic Solutions to America's Racial Wealth Gap. This is our third Prosperity Now Summit Encore webinar, and we are so excited to have you all here today. So Prosperity Summit Encore is a webinar series covering a breadth of topics. Each time we have this webinar, we will feature best practices, powerful lessons, intentional tools, and change makers just like yourself from across our community here at Prosperity Now. And this is also meant to get you pumped for our 2024 Prosperity Summit in Washington, D.C. So we are so happy to be providing you with great content, speakers, and tools all 2023 as we prepare for next year's Prosperity Summit. A few housekeeping notes. So this webinar is recorded and will be mailed to registrants and available online within 1 week. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality, but we do want you to interact with us as much as you would like. Please leave not only questions, but comments for us and the speakers using the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you experience any technical issues, please email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. So we want you to get the most out of today's call. Of course, as always, join from a quiet place, a quiet, comfortable place so you could soak up all the amazing knowledge that we have here for you today. Grab a coffee or a snack, settle in, get nice and cozy. And again, engage with us, send us questions and comments using the questions box on your control panel. And as always, every webinar that we do here at Prosperity Now, we want to ensure that you are able to reflect on ways to apply it to your everyday work and your different efforts in the field. So please reflect on ways that you can apply today's webinar to your work. So just to see who is in the room, we will be launching a poll question. We just want to know who's here. So the poll question for today is, which category best describes the role of your organization or institution? So do you do funding, policy and advocacy, research and development, community engagement, or direct services, or are you in education? And we'll let those come in for a little while just to see who's all in the room. Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds to get those votes in. Okay, so it looks like the majority of our audience today are those practitioners that either work in community engagement or direct services. We also have a good amount of funders in the room, as well as people from educational institutions. And of course, it's Prosperity Now, right? So we have to have policy and advocacy as well as research and development here today. So without further ado, I will pass things over to our moderator for today. Please meet Dr. LaTanya White.
Hey, thank you so much, Olivia, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for something that's really near and dear to my heart. So the poll questions and the answers really reflected several different facets of my identity as an educator, policy, working in advocacy, and certainly direct services. So I'm Dr. LaTanya White. It's a pleasure to be here before you all. I'm an award-winning entrepreneurship educator and researcher, and happy that our friends from Bowie State are on, a Fulbright specialist in business administration and education. And because my research really focuses on racial equity and entrepreneurship ecosystems, my committee members are like, no, not a strategist, but an expert in that field. So I'm also a TEDx speaker and mom to Sparrow, the littlest person that you see on the photo here. So what I'd like to be able to do, we have a little bit of time together, but there's so much that my colleagues and I want to share. So I'm going to quickly get into just kind of set the stage and share a bit of the historical backdrop that we're going to see on the next slide that really captures the entrepreneurial experience, or rather the lived experience of Black entrepreneurs. And we're going to start our discussion really kind of going back to 1896, to this very landmark ruling that legalized racial segregation in America. Now, here we are in 2023 talking about racial equity and entrepreneurship, and we're going to start in 1896. We're not starting with the Civil Rights Act. We're actually going to get to the core of some of the things that affect how Black and Brown entrepreneurs, or the new majority, how that experience of being an entrepreneur has been impacted by legalized racial segregation. Moving forward, so there was some research that was conducted in the 1940s, as we'll see in this next segment, by a white male economist, M.S. Stewart. So what Mr. Stewart really wanted to see was what was the difference between, and he studied a specific sector in the insurance industry. He looked at how white-owned insurance firms, how they compared successfully, numerically, quantitatively to Black-owned insurance firms. And as a lot of us may know today, especially those that are in community engagement and in entrepreneurship ecosystems, many Black-owned businesses are generating far less revenue. In fact, some studies show that Black-owned businesses generate 1/3 the amount of white-owned businesses make in the same industry. So this theory of economic detours that M.S. Stewart landed on in 1940 really was a direct product of Plessy versus Ferguson and legalized racial segregation, because Black and white people could not legally be in the same room with each other. It was extremely difficult, as you might imagine, to build a business that served customers who were not Black customers. Now, from a systemic point of view, what's happened for those business owners? Their consumers were either locked out of the labor market or significantly underemployed, meaning their discretionary incomes were a lot lower. And so the value of the insurance policies that they were able to purchase were significantly lower. This, in turn, of course, meant that the insurance owners, Black-owned insurance companies, were making less money. So this theory of economic detours indicated that because of legalized racial segregation and other systemic issues where Black consumers were generating less money, bringing home less money, they were in turn able to afford less products and services, or fewer products and services. And as we kind of fast forward through what was happening in the economy in the late 80s, there was a celebration almost of what was called ethnic enclaves. And this was where you were able to see how communities in different cities and the ethnic clusters, where the people, where they lived, where they worked, where they did business with each other, they were thriving. And so part of that argument, there was actually one particular study that looked at Cuban American entrepreneurs in Miami, Florida. And there was so much celebration around how these ethnic enclaves were thriving economically. And the question remained, or the question became, well, if Cuban entrepreneurs can experience economic mobility, why aren't Black entrepreneurs experiencing the same thing? And this was a question that was being posed in the 1980s. Here we are, 40 years later, asking similar questions. But John Sibley Butler actually provided a counter argument to that discussion. And the theoretical, the academic name of it is the reconstructed theory of ethnic enclaves. But what he was really saying was that there was no way to compare African American entrepreneurs to other ethnic groups, because African American entrepreneurs have been experiencing discrimination, structural racism, discrimination, systemic oppression in ways that other ethnic and immigrant communities had not. That's not to say that they had not experienced oppression and racism and things of that nature. They just had not experienced in the same way that African Americans had. And that was the basis of his argument. So that work really, I like to think, inspired some of the research that was conducted by Harvey in the early 2000s. And this particular researcher really wanted to take an appreciative perspective of the Black entrepreneurial experience. There was data that showed that there were Black entrepreneurs experiencing economic mobility in different pockets around the country. And what Harvey wanted to do was ask specifically, well, is there an industry specifically where Black entrepreneurs, and in her research, she specifically looked at Black women entrepreneurs. And what we learned from that was this field where women could do well was really for Black women who were in the hair and beauty spaces. So and we'll talk a bit as we continue to advance through the material about how we got here. But Harvey, who my theory is later got married and became Harvey Wingfield, extended that research into saying what happens when a person's lived experience is constrained by structural racism and systemic oppression. That creates a different experience than when that person is a woman of intersectional minorities. And so her further research showed that because of systemic and gendered racism, so not just a woman, but a Black woman or a Hispanic American woman or an Asian American woman, the things that she would experience as an entrepreneur would even further minimize, in some cases, her chances of success. So in this chart on our next slide, what we're going to see is while these things look to be stereotypical, especially for those of us who work in direct contact with entrepreneurs of color, Black entrepreneurs, Hispanic entrepreneurs, and Asian entrepreneurs, what we see are some of the areas where we tend to over index. So Harvey Wingfield's research showed that again, due to systemic and gendered racism, African American women historically were being relegated into hair salons and in the beauty industry. African American men were being relegated, almost shepherded into barbering and music. And so there is data. Professor Keith Hollingsworth at Morehouse, right? He does a lot of research around how barbering became this vehicle for economic mobility for Black men. So these are spaces and industries that are not to be extractive or to take anything away from the Black entrepreneurial experience. This is really to set the stage. And so, what that lends to, especially in the innovation economy and as we prepare for the further globalization of entrepreneurship, what we know now is that the narrative around being a tech enabled, a venture funded, or a lean startup formed business may not always apply to Black and Brown businesses. And a lot of that comes from, again, the lived experience that these entrepreneurs have. So these are the implications, again, for this historical context, as we'll see on the next slide, that, again, in our work with the lean startup methodology and design thinking and rapid prototyping, that this may not be the language that always speaks to the experience, to the ancestral narrative of entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. And this is especially so for first generation entrepreneurs. So that's how we want to really kind of level set this discussion as we hear from some of the academic leaders or hear from the leaders in academic entrepreneurship from leading HBCUs around the country. So I'm looking forward to having my colleagues come on camera so that we can get them introduced and engaged in a little bit of dialogue around what entrepreneurship looks like and what's happening on your campuses. So excited to have Dr. Jason Black. So we can advance to the next slide and the one after that. Excited to have my colleague, Dr. Jason Black, here. Oh, a poll question. I was a little bit too excited. So we'll go ahead and queue up the poll. We'd love to hear again, what's your affiliation with HBCUs, if you have any? So some of the choices for those that may just be listening in, did you graduate from HBCU? Are you the parent or guardian of an HBCU student, a part of an HBCU's faculty, staff, or administration? Have you partnered with an HBCU in some of your work, or not have any affiliation with an HBCU before today? So love to see what your responses will be as we get those questions in. All right. So the majority of the room has no current affiliation with HBCU. So this is going to be really impactful to your work. At least that's our hope. And for our HBCU graduates of HBCU alumni, welcome in. It's so good to have you. Others in the room have partnered with HBCUs or are the parent or guardian of an HBCU student. And then welcome to all our fellow HBCU faculty and staff that are with us. So now we get to introduce some of our colleagues. So Dr. Black, would you just share a little bit about the work that you do, where you are, and some of the things that you're excited about before we get into our questions?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Jason Black. I'm associate professor in the School of Business and Industry on the highest of 7 hills in the state of Florida, in Tallahassee, Florida, where right now it's about 87 degrees. But we welcome you to this panel to tell you a little bit about what I do. As I mentioned, I'm an associate professor in the School of Business. My background is computer science. And about 2015, the dean in the School of Business coerced me to come over to the School of Business to work to build out an entrepreneurship program. So we started our program in 2015. And the goal of our program is to really engage students, not just in starting the businesses per se, but in creating an entrepreneurial mindset. Because whether or not a student starts a business or not, that mindset can help them even if they go to work in corporate America or whatever they decide to do. So we decided to do that around 3 major pillars, which I'm sure you will see as a theme throughout the other panelists' backgrounds as well. Primarily education. So we offer some courses in entrepreneurship that actually Professor White used to teach here at FAMU. These courses are electives for SBI majors, but now they're open for all majors. We also provide a series of workshops, panel discussions, seminar series. We try to coordinate with Entrepreneurship Week and have Black entrepreneur panels, student panels, and really try to get some feedback from our alumni who are now out doing entrepreneurial work in the field. In addition to education, we also focus on student development. So through that, we link our students very closely with our Small Business Development Center, which actually runs underneath our Entrepreneurship Center at FAMU. And we also coordinate really closely with the Tech Transfer Office, Technology Transfer on campus. That's allowed us to get several students to get patents on the research that they've done here at FAMU. One set of students were actually my students when I was in the computer science department. We've also worked to engage students in several competitions, business plan competitions, hackathon competitions. We just had recent students who participated in Pharrell Williams' Black Ambition Initiative, where the overall winner was from FAMU, $200K prize for his idea. So we really work to get students to be engaged and active in those types of competitions where they can showcase business ideas that they have. And then the third pillar that we focus on is community involvement. So our dean, Dr. Shante Friday Stroud, was really intentional about making sure that what we do with our center is not just taking place on campus. Florida A&M sits on the south side of Tallahassee, which is about 91% people of color. And it's also the poorest part of the city economically. And so we try to work very hard to collaborate with organizations and groups on the south side that are really looking to either start businesses or to promote entrepreneurship in the efforts that they already have underway. So we work with our local neighborhood network centers here in Tallahassee. I'm embedded in many of the network center organizations where we listen to what their needs are and try to facilitate and meet those needs in whatever ways we can. We also run a summer program for 3rd through 12th grade students where we engage them for 2 weeks in how to run a business. Basically, those students are responsible for running a lemonade stand where they have to come up with logos and commercials and jingles but they also have to do the hard work, right? They have to understand budgets and how to put a proposal together and how to go out and get investors. So we really have been excited about that. We've actually run that program since 2015, even running it through COVID lockdowns. We ran it virtually, which was very successful as well. And then we also connect with the local entrepreneurial ecosystems in Tallahassee. So Florida State is a neighbor of ours, about a mile and a half from our campus. They have an entrepreneurship school, but there's also an innovation center out at the college at FAMU FSU College of Engineering. So we collaborate with them with programming as well as opportunities. And then we're linked into Tallahassee's entrepreneurship hub, which is called Domi Station, where actually the School of Business is a collaborator and a partner, where we provide some funding for that annually. So we work really hard with that also. And then finally, we became a Blackstone Launchpad chapter back in the fall of last year. This allowed us to work with the Blackstone Charitable Foundation to further advance the programming that we have through our Entrepreneurship Center, and to also collaborate and allow our students to network with other chapters and other institutions that are part of Blackstone Launchpad. So we're really excited about the things that we have going on, and we look forward to not only continuing the things that we're doing at FAMU, but also collaborating and working with many of the organizations and universities that you see on this panel, as well as some of you that are watching and viewing this webinar. So thank you.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Dr. Black. My lemonade, you took me back to lemonade days. So thank you for that. Dr. Bussey, we are going to play the video. So try not to share too much about the ELC in your introduction, but we'd love to hear from you as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. And it's such a pleasure being here. Thank you, Dr. White, for such an exciting setting of context for this conversation. We here at Morehouse in Atlanta, Georgia, does recognize that in order to attain social justice, economic justice is equally as important. And so we see the pathway of business ownership as part of the way of really attaining that economic justice. We've recognized, I'm the executive director of the Morehouse Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center that has been here 20 years now. I'm the founding director, and recognized the need very early, before many of us were talking about the intersection of entrepreneurship on these educational campuses, the need for having our students matriculating at Morehouse to understand what it means to not only start a business, but to be entrepreneurial, as was shared prior. So I think our broad definition of entrepreneurship here is really about the critical thinking skills that come along with being entrepreneurial: solution-driven, problem recognition, understanding how to calculate risk, and those skill sets that really make you a great workforce developer, or someone that any employer would love to achieve. Being a liberal arts institution, that's important to us, that we not only see it as just starting a business. So as Dr. Black has explained, our programming here is also focused on the curricula side. Yes, as a minor, we have a recently approved minor that truly digs into understand how do we teach our communities, our target population, this whole concept of entrepreneurship a little bit differently, to understand those sectionality that was presented in the historical context of gender and systemic biases that have been built into the system. This is not just about technical education in how to read a balance sheet or how to get resources. This is truly understanding from a psychological perspective what it takes to understand the characteristic of being an entrepreneur in a system that wasn't designed for you. And for those reasons, we are really digging deep into understanding the missing pieces that we do believe exist in the curriculum of entrepreneurship on our educational institutions. We have launched a brand new class that was instituted by my colleague, already referenced, on the mindset of understanding the Black mindset in getting through these barriers. So I am super excited to be a part of this conversation because this is important work. We not only focus on our students, we also work and believe that the work in the community is equally as important. So we've been touching over 350 of these businesses. And as Dr. White has explained, we do understand the differences in the types of entrepreneurship. And for those reasons, we are intentionally focusing on those scalable businesses, those that can provide employment. And how do we bridge that between the work we do on the curriculum side and co-curricular side with our students, with those in the community? So it has been an awesome road for us. We are super excited about the work that we're doing. Atlanta just recently was named the city. 7.4% of our businesses are Black owned. This is an exciting time to be in Atlanta, and we are excited to be here at Morehouse to extend the ecosystem, not only on campus, but on to those right outside our gates, which is what exactly this work is about. So we're digging deep, we're intentional about it, and truly understanding that historical context in how we help our students to truly understand and break those barriers outside of those classical areas that we have seen historically that we've been, and what is it going to take to get us there. So thank you again for having me. This is an awesome pleasure and super excited to be a part of this conversation.
Yay, thank you so much. Can't wait to unpack a little bit about the entrepreneurial experience, the internship experience. So we'll do that after we hear from Janetta and Hanif. Janetta, tell us about what's going on Bowie's campus. So what we'll do,
Can you hear me? Hi, can
there
you hear
we
me?
go. There we
Oh,
go.
so sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties here. I'm sorry. We were supposed to clear all that up. But thank you so much. Dr. White, I could sit and listen to you guys all day. I mean, we have done this a lot, and you guys are just really engaging and so much great stuff that's really empowering our students and fostering the spirit of entrepreneurship. And thank you so much for having me. My name is Johnetta Bozeman Hardy, and I am the executive director of the Bowie State University's Entrepreneurship Innovation Center. I've got over 2 decades of experience of running entrepreneurship centers. I've taught entrepreneurship. I've had 4 businesses. I've counseled over 3,000 people on our start a business. And I've kind of been in this space for just a minute, for maybe the last 2 years. But anyway, I enjoy it. I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship and what it can do for anybody, not just launching a business, but thinking about it, just thinking entrepreneurially can advance you in any environment. And so I'm excited to be in this position, and especially at HBCU. I'm a 2-time alum of an HBCU, Howard University, HU. And I'm proud to be here at Bowie State University, the oldest HBCU in the state of Maryland. And we have our first female president, Dr. Aminta Bro, in 150 years. And just a little bit about her. I mean, she gets it. She's a visionary. And her first thing, and just kind of driving back, entrepreneurship started here at Bowie State University. Well, it's been here, if you hear people say, for a while. But the Entrepreneurship Center, where we were providing co-curricular experiential learning opportunities to students to help support the learning, started in 2014. But it was siloed in the College of Business. And when the president and I got here in 2017, we both thought the same thing. I came from environments, a Kauffman campus, where entrepreneurship is a campus-wide initiative. Anybody can come up with an idea. I don't care who you are, And so we wanted to take that same mindset and bring it here to Bowie. And so we are a campus-wide initiative. We report to the office of the provost, but entrepreneurship is so important that our president has added it to her strategic plan, because she believes every student that matriculates through Bowie State University should be exposed to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so we're helping to support that thinking, that behavior, and we're creating this culture. And since I've been here, there's a shift. There is a shift. I can feel it, and we can see it across campus. In fact, my backdrop is usually part of that shift is this 176,000 square foot building called the Entrepreneurship Living Learning Community that our president said, hey, this is my commitment. This is my testament to ensuring that students will have that mindset. It does three things. The building does three things. It's a residential space, 557 beds, 6 floors. Students, collaborate in all kinds of little spaces within that space. And we have a cohort of students, ELLC fellows that we work with. This will be our second year that we're doing it. Or we provide students with content for a whole year and learning experience and working in the community. And then the second thing the building does is the Urban 1865 retail space. So students can come and eat. It's a real cool fireplace. They can buy personal items, but we also have in that space shadow boxes where students can showcase their products and services. And then the third thing that the building does, it's our home, the Entrepreneurship Innovation Center. And as I say, where we support the president through our co-curricular experiential learning opportunities. And because we are a campus-wide initiative, we've got so many pockets of departments that are working with us to help build this from the ground up. We have a steering committee that consists of all the deans, all the chairs, and we meet quarterly, and they help us engage students and help us to create new programming that's current and relevant for their students. We also have, we've got the regular, we've got the pitch competitions. We have a summer launch program, which is a 9-week incubator program that we put students in to help them further their ideas. We have workshops that we do. And also a couple things, getting back to the building. The other thing we do in the entrepreneurship, and you can tell I'm just a little excited. The other thing we do in the building is in the Entrepreneurship Innovation Center. We're taking students from ideation to creation. So we have all kinds of spaces for students to come in and collaborate between the lounge and multi-purpose room. We do fireside chats and workshops. We also have a hatchery where students that's where ideation happens. And then once they're able to come up with these ideas, we have a makerspace where students can then now produce their prototyping. And then we have a venture lab where students that are generating revenue, we put them in that space. We have entrepreneur residents, mentors, coaches that work with them. And the entrepreneur residents aren't just here. We collaborate we're state schools. So we meet monthly with other state institutions of people who do what I do. And we talk about the resources that we have, what's needed, and how they can help build us. And they recognize that, hey, HBCUs are different. We have 4 HBCUs in the state of Maryland: Morgan, Bowie State University, UMES, Coppin State. And so we all are part of that. And they work with us in terms of helping us, supplying us with resources that we don't have, because they know access is a huge part of helping to build what we do. We got to have that access for our students and those resources to help them build on their ideas. And then the other thing that we have in this space, we're the only HBCU to have an accelerator program. So we have the Bowie Business Information Center. So they're sort of our outward-facing business entity. And they have over 1,500 businesses. They provide internships. Our students are able to take their workshops. We also have the Maryland Women's Business Center. We just launched that last year. We have the Maryland Small Business Development Center. So our students, once they start generating revenue, there's a pipeline of other resources in this space to help them continue to grow on their ideas. Now, in addition to that, we're in freshman seminar now. As of last year, fall 21, sorry. Math was never my strong suit. 2021, right? We kicked it off. Last year, we had 1,200 freshmen enter Bowie State University. That was a good problem to have. We're one of the few universities where enrollment was up. Our president was amazed by that. That's a good problem to have because we didn't have a lot of places to put them. But we wanted to make sure freshman seminar in our brand new building, we had over 900 freshmen that actually came in the building, not at one time. They came in different classes and courses. And those students, we had them for a module. We exposed them to the 8 lifelong lessons of an entrepreneurial mindset, pitch competition, about how to do a pitch, the business plan, our president and her vision. And students, walked away. We told the students, you know what? You know how to say the White House is the people's house? This is y'all's house. Come in here. Use these resources to grow your idea. And if you don't have an idea, just hang around. And I can't tell you how many students that just hang around and they are now partners in a company, or they're using their talents. We also have another initiative where students, because entrepreneurship is not, creating a business is not for everybody, but thinking entrepreneurially is. And that's what we want students to feel in this space when they walk in. And so as they think entrepreneurially, they have talent to give, whether it's creating an app, marketing, finance, nursing. Our students have skill set that other founders might use in their business, or they might need a co-founder. So this is the spot where you hook up and you find that partner, you find that person that can help you continue to build on your idea. So I'm gonna pause there. And let other people talk. But we're excited to be here. Oh, and one more thing. We also host the National HBCU, I guess here. I'm the chair for the HBCU Entrepreneurship Conference. And so this is a platform for HBCUs to come, network, strengthen their ecosystem. And it's not just for HBCUs. It's now going to be the HBCU Plus, because we want to be more inclusive. It's not just about HBCUs. It takes a village. It takes a community. And we want those communities to come and learn, how can I help? How can I be a part of that building of that ecosystem? So thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And I know you have your Ask an Entrepreneur seminar that's coming up this afternoon. So in case, I'm glad that you were able to share so much of what you all have going on, just in case you have to duck off or drop off for that one. So thank you so much, but definitely stick around because there are questions.
Okay,
Before we get to the, yes.
One more thing, shameless plug, mark your calendar. September 20th is our next HBCU Entrepreneurship Conference. Thank you.
Entrepreneurship, HBCU Plus Entrepreneurship Conference,
I'm
right?
so sorry. Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you for correcting me. She received our North Star Award, and she was so deserving of that because she is our North Star.
Thank you so much.
Keep your eyes on her.
Thank you. I guess that's a good place to segue to Professor Hanif Omar, who's actually doing double duty today for the webinar, and today, like right now, you have class coming up, right, Professor Omar?
Yeah, my class is actually behind me. Some of my students have already here, so they don't believe that I know what I'm talking about. So I've let them see that I'm actually really active in doing these type of things. But it's a pleasure to be on with you, this esteemed panel. So I'm at Shaw University. It is the oldest HBCU in the South, established in 1865. And 3 years ago, I was asked by the dean of the School of Business, uh, Dr. Lynette Wood, to come and help infuse entrepreneurship into our campus. I was referred to her by a good friend of mine who's also an entrepreneur. So I really say to my students and everyone, I'm really not an academician, I'm actually a practitioner. So one of the first companies that I started is 20 years old this year. We started in 2003. And we've survived 20 years. And so I actually practice and work and run several different businesses. However, I'm also enjoy academics and also enjoy giving back. And so I'm here. I teach entrepreneurship here at the School of Business at Shaw, and I started 3 years ago. And so really what I offer to students here and folks that we outreach to the businesses around in our ecosystem is I offer my mistakes, the mistakes that I've made to get me to the point where I am this far. And I allow them to see some of the things, my successes and my failures, and it helps them get a more real look of what entrepreneurship looks like, and actually encourages them to let them know that if I can do it, you can do it as well. But I also enjoy teaching. And so when I came here to Shaw, my goal was to really infuse entrepreneurship on the campus. And so that's what we have done. We were successful enough last summer to win the MBDA grant to really expand our entrepreneurship program. And one of the missions that I had in expanding our program was I sought out to find different examples of what does an IEC really look like tangibly, and how does it work, and what are all the options that you can do with such a thing on a campus like this. And I saw Bowie State, and I saw Morehouse, and I saw FAMU And the great examples that you guys have and established is something that we really are patterning ourselves here at Shaw. And so again, like what I said, it's so humbling now to once at one point going to conference, listening to these great people, now to be on the same panel with you all is really refreshing, and it comes full circle. So we're really taking off on some of our entrepreneurship programs here at Shaw with the infusion of that capital from MBDA. And we're really just connecting with this, the Triangle area. As you may know, North Carolina was considered the #1 place to do business in America. And so we're really going to tap into that. There's really a strong ecosystem here for small business, but even more important, an African American ecosystem of strong, professional, intelligent people. And we want to be a part of that, and we're going to be a part of that. And so, again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on board with you guys. And so hopefully my class, while we're here, they'll be learning and listening as we continue the conversation. But again, I appreciate being on with all of you guys.
Perfect. Thank you. And what you shared is actually a great segue. So you had this, you used this term practitioner. Dr. Bussey, I know you consider yourself a practitioner. I didn't hear you included in your introduction today, but I think this video that we're going to share, just to highlight one of the really cool things that you're doing at Morehouse, speaks a lot to your commitment to bridging the scholarship and the practitioner aspect of entrepreneurship. So we love to see what you got.
Well, Dr. White, thank you for that, because what I was going to mention is that I'm a nice blend, right? I am an adjunct professor, and I practice. So I get to straddle and enjoy both sides, right? And both worlds. And let me just set a little bit of context to what we're about to see. I've mentioned that we work with businesses in the community. We've been very fortunate. We've helped these businesses raise over $72.9 million in capital. They've done 760 new jobs. This is what we're talking about, building communities. And so this program and what you're about to see is our attempt of really engaging our students on campus with those businesses that we serve in the community. It's through a program called the Entrepreneurial Leadership Consulting Program that gives them exponential learning in terms of understanding what it means to be a part of a small business and understanding entrepreneurship, not from the romanticized version of what they may think about, but truly seeing business in a real context. Thank you.
The Morehouse Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center presents the Entrepreneurial Leadership Consulting Program, or ELC, funded by the Center for Black Entrepreneurship. ELC is an immersive 12-week paid internship. Scholars work in groups to focus on solving a small business challenge.
Essentially, what we have students doing is getting a bit of real-world practice so that they can build their confidence in problem solving and be confident in being able to step out into their professional space or whatever business endeavors they take after they graduate.
ELC interns formulate business models, interact with small business entrepreneurs, gain hands-on working experience, practice creativity and innovation skills, and engage in weekly cohort sessions. The program bridges the work Morehouse does to develop entrepreneurial-minded students with its efforts to build and scale Black businesses within the community.
When we talked to Mr. Tom, he basically told us that his #1 problem was he wanted a one-click LinkedIn post across all social media platforms. But we wanted to dig a little bit deeper, as Dr. Foster has been teaching us. So we basically decided that it was more of a marketing issue.
By creating this connection, the students benefit by having the opportunity to put the problem-solving skills that they've learned into practice on genuine, real-time obstacles these businesses face, and in turn, the small businesses benefit from the insights and perspectives of Gen Z scholars and receive possible solutions to their challenges that they had not considered.
Aaron Petty, I am the CEO of Motivate. We are excited that we were able to participate in this program. The offerings that you guys are bringing to our organization are actually going to be incorporated. This is a real-time issue for us, so we're really going to leverage what you guys have built and hopefully continue to work with all 5 of you as you guys kind of grow through your careers here in Atlanta and at Morehouse.
We would like to thank VTech Solutions for allowing us to work with them, and we want to thank the internship for giving us the platform so that we have all learned a lot. I'm thankful for my brothers for assisting me with this, and that is it. Thank you guys.
The Entrepreneurial Leadership Consulting Program, or ELC. For more information, visit mcecenter.com. Applications are open now.
That was such a cool highlight, Dr. Bussey, of the work that you all have done. I'm trying to contain my excitement as I keep an eye on the time, considering, really the build out of the ELC program. And for context for the panelists, a lot of the discussion that went into building out the ELC was really like, how do we make the argument for bridging that academic theory to assessment, right? And to career readiness. So talk to us, and maybe Dr. Black, if you could kick us off for just a couple of questions before we hear from the audience. But let's talk a little bit about like entrepreneurial mindset. That's one thing that each of you mentioned, the exposure to entrepreneurship, that problem solving, that critical thinking framework, especially in preparing for this major shift in the future of work. But what does, in your experience, Dr. Black, what does entrepreneurial mindset look like for students on your campuses as it's compared to the broader population and the majority in their discussions about entrepreneurial mindset?
Well, that's a great question. One thing that to kind of segue into my comment on that, you notice that all 4 of our centers use the word innovation, right? So really, it's all about teaching your students to be innovators and having an innovative mindset. As I mentioned, I was in the tech space. And if you know anything about the tech space, if you're not an innovator, you're going to be left behind. So I had already started, we're talking 20 years ago, teaching classes where students had to design, they had to think, they had to come up with a solution that was innovative. And that it actually segues perfectly into having an entrepreneurial mindset, because generally, even if you're not creating a brand new product from scratch, you're creating a brand new company from scratch if you start your own business. So you might be taking a new idea from some other idea and putting a new twist on it. In any way you look at it, you have to be able to innovate. So I think it's extremely important, especially for students of color, to be able to strengthen that skill set. I mean, we see it and we know it as older, more seasoned individuals from our knowledge of Black history, right? Coming off of Black History Month, one of the things that inspires me every Black History Month, and not just Black History Month, but all year, is the power and the innovative mindset that our people have had for centuries, considering that we've had little to work with and been able to create things that the world uses on a daily basis right now. And I don't think 2023 is any different. People of color definitely are in a place where we can utilize the skill sets that we have to make significant changes in society. So that's really what we try to push among our students, is how to be a change agent, how to be a disruptive thinker, right? Where you can come up with disruptive solutions that are changing the way society functions currently. That to me is that entrepreneurial mindset gem that I think all of these centers you've seen on the panel are really pushing forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Bussey, do you have anything you'd like to add to build on that?
I think the answer is right on point. One of the things that we focus on and why that piece that we saw is that the students walk away not only interacting with these small businesses, but actually gets to earn a badge in what we call thinking by design, right? And it's really the design thinking framework that is being utilized, that they actually get to use that curriculum in solving and dissecting and understanding this problem that is posed by the small business. And I don't think there's any employer that is out there that would not agree that those are the types of skill set that they're looking for when they're on our campuses recruiting our students. So we see this as another way of preparing our students to understand and be critical thinkers. And again, having broadly defined that, yes, not all of our students are going to leave here starting a small business or starting a business, but really hopefully understanding that skill set and understanding that historical context, and that no matter where they go and navigate as they go to corporate America or they go to somewhere else for employment, they can call upon those awesome skill sets that they're achieving by thinking critically, understanding how to be problems, solution finders, I call them, right? Not looking for problems, but looking for solutions for critical social issues. And we like to push them to think about themselves as solving problems in society, solving problems in their own communities, right? Rather than waiting for others to solve those problems for us. Many times we are users of the music industry or hip hop. Why not create these things that we are many times consumers of, and think about them? Again, we know that businesses that succeed solve a problem, a big problem that millions and millions of people have. So when we start thinking about those things and really start educating around those frameworks, I think then we're really kind of bringing everything together.
Absolutely. So interestingly, Dr. Black, you talked about, really kind of amplifying the contributions of Black entrepreneurs as we round out Black History Month. I shared that Professor Omar is doing double duty, right? So Professor Omar, tell us also a little bit about your work in the financing space that you've experienced, especially in light of the entrepreneurial experience for Black and Brown founders.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So first, I would like to say what you guys just did, Dr. Bussey and Dr. Black, in terms of just the mindset or the entrepreneurship mindset. You guys just taught a little bit of my course, the entrepreneurship course here that I hit with my students. And we're simply reading Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice by Dr. Dennis Kimbrough. And so that's how we're trying to get that mindset across. And so I really appreciate you guys for saying that, because I'm not the only one saying that to them. But in terms of in part of my work as in the consulting, I started a consulting business, and I do finance underwriting for CF, CDIFs and banks. I do small business finance, and I analyze financials and things of that nature. And so it being in this finance space, I really feel like that's one of the biggest issues for small Black businesses to scale. I think earlier you talked about, even being in some of the same industries, we only make a third of what white companies make in those same industries. And part of that is being undercapitalized, not being able to take advantage of certain opportunities that are there that require certain injection of capital, whether it be equity injection and or debt injection. But that's something that I've made near and dear to my heart, to find out really how to figure out how to get to cash, how to get to the bag, so that we can get this money to Black businesses that really need it. And if the quality of the product is there, the quality of the service is there, and it's equal with the right level of capital, we can scale just like traditional companies as well. And so that's really where my focus has been the last 18 months.
Okay. And thank you for that. So to that end, you mentioned earlier the MBDA. So for those that aren't familiar with that acronym, the Minority Business Development Agency, which I know Morehouse and Bowie State both have different and respective partnerships with MBDA, but there also is, due today, this huge funding opportunity, the Capital Readiness Program, $93 million that the MBDA has been essentially commissioned to parcel out to entrepreneur support organizations who specifically understand the needs of socially and economically disadvantaged individuals in the entrepreneurship space. Now, you and I, we were speaking about the correlation or the relationship between this capital readiness program and the state small business credit initiative that's coming down from the Department of Treasury. With your background, with your insight about, I think you called it lender readiness or the lending criteria, how does the historical aspect of Black entrepreneurship and the mindset and the lived experience, how do we fully prepare entrepreneurs from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds? How do we prepare them to be lender ready and credit worthy for access to this state SSBCI funding?
Well, yeah, definitely. Specifically, I mean, I think, and then also that's why I enjoyed a lot of your research, because you talk about the psychology of entrepreneurship in this country, of Black entrepreneurs in this country. I mean, again, real quickly, it's still Black History Month, right? So we can talk a little bit about the Freedmen's Bank. And the Freedmen's Bank was a bank that, when we didn't get our 40 acres and a mule, we were promised a Freedmen's Bank so that we can deposit funds there and build wealth that way. And soldiers could establish, wealth and take care of their families. So as a result, between the years of 1865 to 1874, 70,000 accounts of African Americans deposited funds into this Freedmen's Bank with the hope and dreams of not to retaliate against our oppressors, but to become part of America and to make a living and to start enterprises in some of those same fields that we help the South thrive. And so with that being said, unfortunately, Henry Cook, and under the direction of the US government, Henry Cook proceeded to rob the freedmen of the equivalent today of $1.3 billion. It was robbed from the Freedmen's Bank in 1874, even with the attempts of Frederick Douglass to come in at the last moment to become head of the bank, was all not successful. And so that is with that basis that African American entrepreneurs, or African Americans in general, have kind of a PTSD around really saving money in banks or establishing a banking relationship. And so, that's why we would see folks, if like keep money in mattresses or do all types of alternative ways to save money. However, if we plan to participate as capitalists in this system, because we haven't broken away totally from the system, we need to know how to get bankable. How do we get bankable? How do we access some of these funds that are coming down from the feds, like the SSBCI funds? How do we get these funds? And the first thing, unfortunately, there's not too many ways around it. We have to know the fundamentals of really being bankable. We have to have cash flow with our business. So that's the first thing we have to have. We have to have a viable product, a viable service, and you have to have cash flow. In most cases now, you have to have some level of credit. You have to have some history of, establishing credit and paying credit and things of that nature. And then there's other things like character, that you have to, there's 5 C's, and portion is collateral. Do you have some level of asset that's going to help you access these funds, or be leveraged to a bank in order to access these funds? So with that being said, even with the MBDA and the SSBCI, there are some tenets that we have to incorporate into understanding, that are necessary, that we need in order to get to this financing. So my specific experience in the state of North Carolina with the SSBCI program is that it is a program that funds are, come from the Fed level, down to a fiduciary agent in the state, that every state has a fiduciary agent or entity that these funds are dispersed to. And these funds then are dispersed to that entity, and that entity then partners with traditional banks, CDFIs, other non-traditional lenders in order to funnel those funds into the minority community. And so here in North Carolina, last year it was $40 million of funds, and then this year $200 million of those funds were distributed to the state of North Carolina. And I've had some intimate experience in terms of looking at applications and helping underwrite loans under this program. And so it's definitely something that I think is important. It's definitely something that I think that we as African American entrepreneurs should tap into, because now we live in a construct where we're not the only minority in the country. And so therefore, a lot of the programs, just like the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was initially intended for the descendants of slaves or enslaved people, these programs are no longer just for African Americans. And so therefore, the vast majority of folks that take advantage of these programs, unfortunately, are not African Americans. And so it's really platforms like this and others that we can get the word out and get the expertise out, so that people can really know, African American business can really know and understand, get over the phobia of not using the bank, using it for leverage, and really qualify for these funds that are coming down from the Fed level. So that's really where I put a lot of my work now, and really trying to educate and really underwrite deals that really can help our community.
Oh, that was so good. That was so good. So what I'm going to do from this insight that you share, Professor Omar, is really kind of walk us through what the work that HBCUs are doing, this historical context and background that we have, and now where we are today, and access to these financing, traditional and more alternative financing options, is really to present this systemic approach, right? So to Dr. Bussey's point, not just problem finders, but solutions providers. So in these next few slides, in the next couple minutes that we have before we get to Q&A, what I like to really kind of highlight is this missing link. So we've talked about the micro level links, right? What's happening in entrepreneur support organizations, on campuses, in entrepreneurship ecosystems. And we talked a lot about what's happening at the macro level, the MBDA Capital Readiness Grant, the Department of Treasury's State Small Business Credit Initiative, President Biden's executive orders on advancing racial equity, with the most recent one having been published just last week on February 16th. But I think a part of, and many of us know this, when we're talking about what technical assistance is, it's usually focused on providing services and support to the entrepreneur for their business. There has been much more discussion about entrepreneurial development for the entrepreneur themselves, but at the meso level, if we really consider, now this is if you consider entrepreneurship as a pathway to wealth building and really to closing the racial wealth gap. And I'm biased because I firmly believe that what's missing is the way that wealth is being transferred. If you're plugged in deeply to the work that Prosperity Now is doing, you know that a lot of their advocacy is about access and closing the racial wealth gap. And from the research that I've conducted, like there's a chasm between what's happening when we're building wealth, especially in Black entrepreneurship communities and diverse families, and how that wealth is transferred. So as I was conducting my dissertation research, I really came across this concept or this construct of dynastic families. And so these are families who have, by academic definition, a family reaches dynastic status once the wealth has been controlled, either the wealth or the business has been controlled within the family for 3 consecutive generations. And what we've learned, especially again, if you're plugged into what's happening for Black entrepreneurs and the Black entrepreneurship ecosystems around the country, there's a lot of excitement around this concept of generational wealth, right? A lot of entrepreneurship advocates are celebrating what we're learning about generational wealth. And the thought is that generational wealth will be what really advances economic mobility. And so I'm okay having the unpopular opinion that generational wealth is not the answer, because I've seen the research and the empirical and strategic approach that dynastic families take when they begin to transfer wealth for 3, 5, 7 generations even. So what you see here on the screen really is the strategy that takes place in different families, these dynastic families. And so as I came across this research about the Rockefeller family and the Walton family and the Mars family, one of the things that struck me was that they aren't simply focusing on transferring financial wealth. There are actually 5 forms of wealth that these families focus on packaging, protecting, and passing down. But it's all informed by this, what's called a generative script. So as educators, right, our work is generative. And generativity is this characteristic of being committed to and leading and nurturing, mentoring future generations for the benefit of society in the future. So by definition, as educators here, our work is generative. But for many Black and Brown entrepreneurs, they are not in pursuit of unicorn status. Many of them are in pursuit of creating better opportunities for their families and their communities. And so they operate with this generative lens in the work that they do. So this missing link in wealth creation and wealth transfer, as we all are working to close this racial wealth gap, is really how the family is engaged in the wealth that's being generated through entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I'm happy to talk more about this framework, really looking at these other 4, these qualitative forms of wealth: spiritual wealth, the wealth of knowledge, intellectual wealth, and relational wealth, and how that shows up in Black families and in Black households, and how it's translated to Black communities. So Dr. Black and I at FAMU, we're working together to really walk members of the Tallahassee entrepreneurship ecosystem through these steps through the Building Black Dynasties program that's brought to the Tallahassee community by the Blackstone Launchpad. So as we get into some of the questions that are showing up in the chat today, this is really, really exciting. So I think we'll have everyone who's still with us come back on camera and kind of unpack some of these questions that we are seeing showing up in the chat. Great.
And Dr. White, if I may, just before we get to questions, in light of also thinking about turning this question on its head, right, and thinking differently, I want to offer that in collaboration with the International Comparative Labor Studies Center here at Morehouse, on March 31st, we're going to be launching a study that's been done to really look at employee ownership as a pathway. So not only in terms of actually, and I saw a few questions kind of referring to it, what can others that are not starting a business, and from what we originally or in the academics call organically, but what else can be done as we talk about this generational wealth and passing this down, is to really think about these pathways differently. And we do believe, and again, our research, which is going to be, the paper is going to be launched on March 31st here at Morehouse, is really looking at employee ownership and having that even for advanced businesses as a pathway. And what does funding that might look like also? We often think of the general VC route for just starting tech companies. Recently, we've seen some funds that have started to fund employee ownership. So I call it, the BET model, because we saw that working, where it wasn't just one millionaire that was created by the sale of a Black company, but several millionaires were created because others were part owners of that company. So again, different ways of thinking of different pathways and different models, I think, is all part of this. I know, he's here. Hanif is still here. In terms terms of the different funding mechanisms. For us here, many of our students immediately want VC funding, right? We know that the rounds for VC fundings usually start from what we call companies with traction, and that friends and family rounds is usually the very first round. Well, there's a question in the chat about the huge debt that our student population leave our institutions with, and do we expect them to be able to fund themselves in this friend and family round? I know I don't have that in my family. So looking at different types of funding that will help address that, because traditionally, again, the system was designed that way. We need to think of alternatives to really address that. Perhaps it's by grants, because that's really what it is, and that has to be part of the conversation when we start, and not all debt. Most of the MBDA type of capital that's coming out, it was very refreshing to see that there's an equity piece to that. But traditionally, most of the federally backed kind of funding has been debt funding. And the last things our community need might be more debt. So we really need to have a national conversation around these alternative forms of funding. And I just wanted to do that piece justice by being able to bring that to the attention before we close this conversation.
Yeah, my apologies. We were going over the final pieces of our lesson, so we're kind of finished now, and my class is still here. But let
No
me say
worries.
this. So a couple things about that. I mean, and this is a good education for them as well. So a couple things about that. Yes, there's different ways to raise capital. As we know, the statistics say 98% of VC capital goes to uh, um, white companies, so we only get 1.2 approximately percent of VC capital. So for us, are we able to look in that pool? Sure, we should try to qualify. We should try to get quality enough business to try that, but most likely we're not going to be able to get to that type of VC capital. There are other ways to do it. There's crowdfunding, where you can access capital, and that's kind of similar to friends and family and things of that nature. But the other thing that I've made it a practice of my own to realize that the ultra wealthy folks in this country, they actually use debt to an advantage. And so scaling your business via debt is not the end all be all. Personal debt and business debt are two different things. So I encourage every student, every person here that's listening today to go out and start an LLC, period. Just go find a way to start an LLC, because everything you run on your personal side, you can do that via the LLC and establish some level of business credit or personal credit or what have you via the correct legal vehicle. So you can be a person that has W-2 income, but also has an LLC. And that's how you begin to start to develop that history. And once you just develop some level of business history and you file returns or what have you, or you show cash flow coming through that particular entity, then you can access some level of debt capital. And then there are ways to use debt capital where it is not that harmful to your company. There's CDFIs, which are a little bit more friendlier with terms. They may not take collateral and things of that nature. And then to your point, this SSBCI funds, these funds, and even if you go back during the pandemic, the EIDL funds, those are some of the friendliest terms you'll ever see from debt capital. The EIDL funds are 30 years, 2 and 3% loans. And I've even underwritten loans where there are companies that still have their EIDL debt there, but because that debt is so friendly, then we also can still do financing in a different way because it's not that much of a burden. But to your point, yes, we have to find alternative ways to finance, even going back to our traditional systems of what we would call a Tauntaun system, where groups, and we talk about the history of Black entrepreneurship, business leagues, and things of that nature, pooled funds, and then we would give. And even today, if you ask, immigrant groups still do that here in America, where the groups will get together and they put pool funds, and then we're going to fund this one project for X amount of time, and we all get around and support, and then that money is replenished back, and then you fund the next business. And so there are definitely ways, strategic ways we can overcome this wealth gap. You know, it's not going to be easy, but there are definitely strategic ways we can do it. And I think a little bit of equity funding and a little bit of debt funding or cash injection, it can be good for a healthy business. But the primary thing, lastly, I'll say is you got to have a great product. It doesn't matter how you have access to capital or not. The service has to be great and the product have to be great. And as long as that's great, I think you really have most of the battle done. Somebody like myself, I can leave my email or what have you. If you have a great product and you have a problem with getting access to capital, I'll commit myself through my network of folks to find some level of capital, whether it be grant, debt, or equity financing for great business ideas.
Thank you so much for that, for setting that up, for teeing that up, Dr. Bussey, and then for taking us through with your response, Professor Omar. So, Dr. Black, you talked a little bit about your background in technology. As we know, as many of us know, Black businesses lack the opportunity to be considered scalable and investable because they aren't always tech enabled or don't incorporate technology. What are your thoughts on how we can begin to address that as a cause of this gap between the scalability of Black owned businesses?
Well, you can look at it several different ways. If you talk about it from the academic standpoint, from a professor standpoint, what I would encourage other professors and other faculty to do is really enforce that students are learning as much about technology as possible. The beauty of technology now is you don't have to pay for it to learn it, right? I mean, there are so many tools available, tutorials available. Some whole universities have their entire degree programs free that you can take courses and get the same skill set as someone coming out of a MIT from your living room without having to pay any money for that. So students can definitely are encouraged to learn as much as they can, as well as get involved in as many tech entrepreneurship competitions, hackathons, things where you get to spread your wings. Because one of the beautiful things about those types of events is they will also train you on certain tools and techniques that might not be available at your institution that you can pick up and get some background from. From a grant writing capability, there are programs out that faculty and even entrepreneurs can apply for. NSF has a program called I-Corps where you can, a university that is interested can partner with a corporation and put together some funding to support entrepreneurship and business development on that campus with the assistance of that corporate or business entity. And that's a really highly respected program. It's been around for quite a while. A lot of HBCUs have already received the I-Corps grant. I know we had one here at FAMU for a while, and I think just about everybody on this panel, someone at their institution, if not the people on the panel, have had one. So that's a really good way to get connected with what's going on in the tech space. Most of these federal agencies are really looking now at trying to make sure that we compete from a data perspective. The world is all driven by data now. And if you're not understanding how to manipulate and analyze data, you're going to be behind the curve. So I would say look for funding, look for partnerships. There are tech institutions or tech organizations in your local town. I know Tallahassee has the Tallahassee Technology Alliance, which is a group of business representatives that are involved in the tech space that are also looking to push entrepreneurship. So many of those organizations will collaborate with your entrepreneurship program or your department if you don't have an entrepreneurship program yet to try to help you get one started. So there's a lot of avenues out there that you can go to get more tech resources.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Yes, NSF I-Corps. And then, of course, Dr. Bussey, you may remember the resources that our friends at VentureWell sent over that had all of those funding opportunities that really are innovation centered. So definitely want to make sure that we are capitalizing on those funding opportunities to share with not just our students, but Black entrepreneurs in the community and in these ecosystem-based or community-based ecosystem players that we work with. And to that end, I really wanted to hear from Janetta, if she's still on, about the ways that her program. So the question reads, let's see, what the plan for entrepreneurship and community outreach outside of the classroom and off campus, actually in the community. So Janetta, is she still on? And I guess maybe while she's queuing up, Dr. Black, and you talked about Lemonade Day, a little bit about Tau Tech Alliance. What are some other ways, and I think through maybe ICCI, the Interdisciplinary Center for Creativity and Innovation, how is community outreach showing up with your work?
So yeah, as I mentioned in my intro, one of the things that we were intentional about doing was going out in the community and finding out what was going on and what was needed. Oftentimes those of us at institutions kind of sit in our silos and we think what the community should have without really talking to the people that are in the community. So having lived in Tallahassee for 30 some odd years, I've kind of gotten connected with a lot of people who are boots on the ground as it relates to economic development here in town. And so I basically linked up with as many of those people as possible to find out what was needed from our community members here in Tallahassee. And so really just getting connected with those organizations that are doing work already, and finding out how you can assist, whether that is providing programming for them or allowing them to provide resources for you and your students on campus. Many of the people in the community are doing some fantastic things that we just may not be aware of. And those things can benefit our faculty and our students. And that will help us also assist them because we can push that out in a much wider network than they might currently have reach in. So that's what I would highly recommend, that you just really connect with as many organizations as possible and just try to collaborate and work together.
And I'm not sure if can you certainly go ahead and share what you guys are doing, because I did share in Atlanta this active ecosystem that we have through our speaker series. We have those that are from the community coming in on campus, alumni engaging with the students. And this evening, as a matter of fact, we launch our next cohort of 12 new businesses that are coming into our Small Business Executive Certificate program, which we run. It's a 6 to 9 month executive series that intentionally look at small businesses that are scalable and connecting them to what we call opportunity partners. We have partnered with Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the largest international airport in the world, where we will be providing intentional procurement opportunities to these programs, companies going through our cohort small business executive program. So again, very intentional with this work in terms of engaging the community and also engaging the students on our campus. Thank you. And I'm sorry, Hanif, please do share.
No, I mean, you're saying exactly what I was about to give you guys kudos for, that level of connection to the community. And we here at Shaw University are using that as an example to really involve the different industries around our university to kind of make this university, or to make our innovation center organic part of our ecosystem. And I think for all those that's listening, the example that you guys have set there at Morehouse is outstanding. And that's what I wanted to say anyway. I was just giving you guys props, because that means a lot. And that's really why I say I'm a practitioner. And so I really want to connect to folks that are doing things, so that not only we don't have to duplicate effort, we can combine with the community and really be in touch and become a hub of what's going on in the business community. And I think you guys do a great job of that at Morehouse. So
thank you.
I'm glad you talked about that, because I think people should look into that more.
Very good. This was amazing. Thank you all so much for joining me. And for Prosperity Now, thank you for creating this space for us to share the things that we're working on to advance and assess, for lack of a better term, racial equity and entrepreneurship ecosystem. So happy to turn it back over to our friends at Prosperity Now.
Thank you all for such an amazing webinar. We still have questions coming in the questions box, so we will definitely have an offline conversation about how we can get those answers to the audience via email within the next week or so. So just next steps, we want you all to visit our advocacy center, think of ways to continue to engage and affect your communities as well as communities at a national level. And also stay tuned for other Prosperity Summit Encore webinars. If you liked this one, you will definitely like what we have coming down the pipeline. Also, plug in to the Prosperity Now community. Sign up for any of our networks. You can sign up for the Financial Security Network, our Affordable Housing Network, our Taxpayer Opportunity Network, and our Campaign for Every Kid's Future Network. And again, this is Prosperity Summit Encore, so we have to plug those dates for our Prosperity Summit 2024. So please save the date, September 4th through September 6th, to continue to interact with speakers just like the ones that we had today in person. And again, thank you so much for coming today. We really enjoyed hearing from the audience. I want to thank all of our speakers. It's great to see the work that's happening at different HBCUs up and down the East Coast. And thank you again for joining us. Please complete our survey. Have a great one.